Well, the World Cup has finally wrapped up and Spain are once again world champions. We've got plenty to discuss on this week's episode of Market Value. It's episode 19, if you can believe it. Thank you to everyone who's been listening from episode 1. A big thank you to everyone who's also been leaving reviews, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It makes a big difference. And we're just happy that more and more of you seem to be joining and listening to along with each passing week. But like I said, this week's episode is all about the World Cup, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host Manu Vett. And Manu, you're the perfect person to have on at this moment in time because you were there. You were probably gasping for air in what looked like a sauna of a stadium in New Jersey, and you took in Spain's second World Cup victory. What did you make of it, bud? And of course, what did you make of the tournament as a whole? Because you're obviously traveling across it for TransferMarkt from day one.
Yeah, part of me is happy it's over. There's this sweet relief when you walk out of the stadium for a final time. There's also all these amazing memories that you make along the way. The games you can kind of know. I got home very late last night. I had to fly back from New York to the West Coast where I'm based. It's a long travel day. And I think now I'm at the stage where I'm finally realizing how amazing of an opportunity this is to cover a World Cup. We're journalists, we complain along the way a lot, and we forget that this is, most people in the world would kill to do what we do. And I'm very appreciative of it. And yeah, the World Cup final, I mean, it's he spent 3 hours prior to on the parking lot somewhere in the middle of New Jersey because President Donald Trump was there, which meant there was longer security lineups than usual to get in. Then you're in, and then it's just such a rush. And of course, you do all the preparation beforehand, make sure that you have every content available to you that you need in case of either team winning. And I think the game itself, was such a dominant performance by Spain that I never really had a doubt that they would win it, even though it took us 120 minutes to actually do it. Argentina didn't have a single shot on goal until I think after Spain scored, and which is just I've not seen anything like that before. And then there was of course all the halftime show, all the surrounding stuff, very American experience of a World Cup. I know some people liked it, some people hated it. I think that is a debate for another day. But I can say one thing, after I've seen all the games, been to the different stadiums, I think we are walking away from this tournament with maybe a very deserved World Cup winner. I did not see a more complete team. And I think that is so very fascinating, Stefan, because this entire tournament was very American, that it was so focused on the stars. It was focused on Lionel Messi. It was focused on Cristiano Ronaldo. It was focused on Erling Haaland. It was focused, on those Kylian Mbappé. These were the people that took the stage. And at the end of the day, the team that didn't have a standout star won. And that is a very anti-American thing at the end of the day, that the team that actually performed as a team won the tournament. I thought that was really interesting and very much a win for football overall.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I completely agree. I think you're right. Not only did the best team win, but in many ways, I thought the only real team at this tournament, because Spain being Spain, when things click into gear for them, they do play like a club team, really, don't they? And obviously, De La Fuente, the Spain national team coach, knows most of those players from a very young age. And when you kind of put it all together, you think, yeah, it makes perfect sense that Spain went on to win it. But I don't think I've read a single preview or listened to a single podcast or show tipping Spain to win this World Cup. It was all kind of France or nothing, really. I think I probably heard Brazil had a better chance more than Spain going into the tournament. So, I think they probably, they upset the odds a little bit, but by all means, the deserving winners in it. And it's interesting you mentioned the stars, because obviously here at TransferMarkt, we cover market values, and we have had our market value update right after the World Cup. I think 99 players, if I'm not mistaken, Manu, have had their market value changed after the competition. We should probably touch on this briefly. It's not like a typical market value update where we lower market values and increase market values. It's very specifically just market values being increased for players who had standout
Mm.
performances, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is really important. We don't downgrade players for tournaments. And I think that falls into line of what executives have told me. World Cups and tournaments aren't really there to for players to be discovered, but to confirm the market value that they have already established for the club teams playing in their domestic competition and in competitions like the Champions League. And this is really just an opportunity for us to say, yeah, this player confirmed market value that was already there and increased it. And I think there's some really good examples throughout this update that highlight this. Someone like Erling Haaland, who we already knew was amazing. He goes onto the biggest stage and he performs. Kylian Mbappé, Mr. World Cup. He's someone who stood out. Lamine Yamal, maybe not the best tournament performance, but nonetheless, very important player for Spain. Wins the World Cup now after he wins the Euros before he even turns 20. Those are the things that kind of stand out, and I think that is a really important takeaway. Though this is not really a market value update; it's a market value upgrade for a select few players that did really well at this tournament.
Yeah, it's almost like when a video game brings out a patch to update it. It's a market value patch, if you will, from TransferMarkt, which is, as you said, what we like to do after every major tournament. And we will be discussing all the major upgrades later in the show with our colleague Toby Kroger. But Manu, we have one thing we have to discuss before that, and that, of course,
Mm.
is the player of the tournament. Now, FIFA awarded that to Rodri because obviously, well, he
Yeah.
obviously played very well for Spain, but it's because, let's be honest, Spain won the World Cup, and these things tend to go to the person who wins the World Cup.
Well,
Um,
except
no,
once.
except once.
2014, Messi won it, even though everyone knows Manuel Neuer should have.
Said like a true Bavarian. But yeah, I think we also had, I don't think, I know, we also held our own vote on TransferMarkt
Mm.
for our users, and thousands of users across the world took part in this to discuss who should be the player of the tournament. And the results are in. And Manu, I can put them up on screen now. And for anyone who's listening at home, don't worry, we'll go through it. But with 36.9% of the vote, Lionel
Mm.
Messi was picked as the TransferMarkt player of the tournament for the 2026 World Cup. And as you just alluded to there, Manu, maybe in the past he's been given this award when he maybe didn't deserve it. But I think in this instance, I think you could certainly make a strong argument why Messi was perhaps the player of the tournament. Obviously, didn't have the best game in the final, but the manner in which he kind of dragged Argentina through that tournament, and specifically those two assists against England, I think were just showcased a player who, in a weird way, kind of showed why he is the best player of all time. Not because the performances in this tournament were the best of all time, but because only a player of his caliber could do these things at the age of 39. And I think, I think there's certainly a good case to be made that he was the best player of this tournament in many ways, even if he didn't get to pick up the trophy at the end of it.
Yeah, we have for years had the Cristiano Ronaldo versus Lionel Messi debate. That's over. I think we can bury that. It's Lionel Messi. And I was extremely impressed by his tournament. To do the things he did at 39, scoring 8 goals in 8 games, 4 assists as well, right? Only to be outdone by Kylian Mbappé, who scored twice in that wild third place game. So I wonder if we need to put a bit of an asterisk on Mbappé scoring 10 goals there. But yeah, when Rodri was given the player of the tournament award, and I agreed with that outcome by FIFA. There were lots and lots of Messi chants, by the Argentinian fans who haven't gone home at that stage yet when the tournament trophies were given out. There were lots and lots of Messi chants. And I don't necessarily disagree with them because I think without Messi, Argentina aren't there. And Leo Scaloni, the head coach of Argentina, was out in tears after the tournament saying, we have to rebuild this team now. And really what he meant is we have to now find a way to win without Messi because that is really hard.
Yeah.
This entire team was built around Messi. And I think it sounds like he's going to step back from the role and give it to someone else because I think Argentina are now entering a phase where this is going to be extremely difficult for them. A lot of their key players are entering a part of the career that is the fall of the career. And the player that has carried them for now, this would have been the fourth tournament in a row that they would have won. Lionel Messi, that was all him. And that is now over. And I think that is a monumental task. And I think we now are actually going to find out how important Messi was for this team. And I don't disagree with our users. It wouldn't have been my choice. I think Rodri, and I wrote this in an article that's on TransferMarkt, is the deserved winner. But I understand the other argument as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that Argentina team were 10 players who ran for Messi, and now that
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously not going to be playing for the national team, you never know. He might go to the next Copa America. It really remains to be seen. But I think going forward, Argentina are going to have a complete rebuild, a refit, maybe even like a rebranding, if you will, in terms of how they play their football as well, without Messi in there. But just kind of want to throw a light on, or shine a light on the other players who came close. Kylian Mbappé, the clear second choice amongst users, won 25.1% of the vote. And then after that, man, it gets very interesting. Cape Verde goalkeeper Vicinha, of course, the hero in that Spain game, got 8.5% of the vote, which was more than Erling Haaland, who got 7.9%, and Jude Bellingham, who got 6% exactly. I feel like Manu, some football fans may be having a bit of fun here. I think Vicinha, obviously, one of the heroes, one of the great stories this tournament. Maybe a bit of a protest vote there from some, I don't know, Brazilians or angry Germans. I'm not quite sure. But it's great that he got third place. I'm kind of glad he didn't get first place, I'll be honest. But some interesting decisions there, aren't there?
Every tournament has its Roger Miller. That's the reference, of course, to the legendary Cameroonian forward of the 1990s, and who burst onto the scene at a very late age and did really great things at the World Cups and nowhere else. Mozinha is the 2026 Roger Miller. I know he played in goal, of course, but yeah, he's done really well for him out of this tournament. He's what is it? His social media following exploded to around 30 million on Instagram from what was it, 2000. If he doesn't, there will be a club signing him based on that alone. Just to get that, I think his marketing, whoever does his marketing, whoever is his agent, will have a blast figuring out all sorts of advertising deals for him, which great, good job, well done. And I think that was also a reason why there were so many votes for him, because of his social media following. That's usually how it goes. It's a great story. Was he the third best player in the tournament? No.
Well, interestingly enough, Manu, I'm on his rumours page right now. He's been linked to a lot of clubs. He's been linked to Betis. He's been linked to Colo Colo, a few clubs in Saudi Arabia, a few clubs in Greece, I think, as well. But he's
Mhm.
also recently been linked to Inter Miami. So you
Yeah,
never know. He could be taking his followers to MLS to play alongside Lionel Messi,
I've
which
been
is,
told that's not happening, but
okay.
I wouldn't be shocked if an MLS team would do it, though.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, because I think we do have to move on, but I'm actually quite intrigued the fact that Erling Haaland got such few votes and Jude
Yeah.
Bellingham as well, compared to Mbappe. Maybe I do agree. I think Mbappe was probably on paper, probably, well, he got the most goals, so he deserves, and he obviously won the Golden Boot for his heroics. But considering the kind of buzz around Haaland this tournament, I would have thought he maybe would have picked up more of the votes. And then, of course, Jude Bellingham was the star of the England team. But I suppose, Mbappe has the support of France behind him, and there's a huge French community on TransferMarkt. So maybe that's what won him the day. But I would have thought Haaland would have been a bit closer to Mbappe on these votes.
Yeah, maybe because they both listed as strikers, right? So they stole votes from one another before they got to the final vote.
Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, Erling Haaland is another guy who's done. Most people knew he was a superstar, but he is now every person, like my wife's friends know Erling Haaland. That he's gotten now to the level in North America where he is a star beyond the pitch, which is a really difficult thing to do in North America, right? Football fans will know him, but casuals will not know, and they would know who Lionel Messi is and Cristiano Ronaldo. They also now know who Erling Haaland is. And that's actually something that he's probably surpassed Kylian Mbappé, because
Mm.
normal people that walk around North America probably still don't really know who Mbappe is, or even Lamine Yamal. They definitely
Yeah,
know Erling Haaland, and that was the case before he stepped out of the plane with a raccoon in his hand. Um,
yeah. Full of booze, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're
yeah,
right. I think in the way that Messi and Ronaldo kind of transcended the football to become part of like US culture, I think I agree with you. I think if Haaland was to
yeah.
walk down, um, Main Road or a Main Street in New York, he probably would get flooded with
Mhm.
fans a little more so than maybe a Jude Bellingham or
You
Mbappe.
know,
But
from speaking of New York, for me, the thing that makes a true global star is if you make it onto one of those big billboards on Times Square.
mm,
Now Holland hasn't been there yet, but he will be there. Like, I can totally see like a Hugo Boss, David Beckham style commercial with Erling
yeah,
Haaland, because the women love him,
yeah,
and that is, that puts you on a level, that makes, if you, that sort of global star like a David Beckham or like a Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, that helps. And
yeah.
yeah.
I think I think over the course of the tournament, the two topics that seem to be across Instagram or my Instagram of Americans reacting to things World Cup were the Tartan Army, the Scotland fans, and then
Yep.
it shifted very quickly to who the hell is this Erling Haaland guy? He's
Yeah.
incredible, such a character, so funny. And yeah, I completely agree with you. I think he definitely stood out there. So I'm surprised he didn't get the American vote. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. But Manu, we do have to move on because this is called market values. This isn't called US popularity podcast. And we do have to get to the market values. Some huge
Mhm.
changes for some of the biggest players in the world. The top 20 most valuable players list has changed quite dramatically. And we've actually even broken the record for the most valuable player of all time. So, yeah, we'll get into that with Toby right after this break. But moving on to the main topic on this week's podcast, and we are delighted to be joined by Toby Kroger, who, as long-time listeners will know, heads up our market value team at TransferMarkt. And Toby, you're on the show to answer some questions. You're here to explain some decisions alongside myself and Manu. And over the course of the next 20, 25 minutes, we're going to try and go through most of the big names from the market value update on TransferMarkt this week. And in front of us, we have a list of, I think, 16 or 17 players. It's every player who's had a market value increase of 15 million euros or more. It's an interesting collection of players, and I think we could maybe just start at the bottom. And actually, Manu, I'll maybe come to you first, actually, because it's a player in your backyard, Gilberto Mora, the Mexican player. We spoke about him before this World Cup
Mhm.
and the hype around him. And we've seen his market value increase by 15 million euros, Manu. And it's probably not very hard to explain why.
Yeah, I mean, he's was one of the young outstanding players at the tournament, right? I think really met expectations, I would say. Goes from the 10 million to 25 million euros. Yeah, I mean, he carried such a heavy load, going into the World Cup, obviously being Mexico being one of the host nations, and the he being one of the biggest talents, the biggest talent, that Mexico has produced in quite some time. And there's always, Mexico is such a difficult market to operate in for young players, because this is a country that is football mad. A huge population, has hosted the tournament now 3 times, but never really have performed up to expectations at a World Cup. And there was a lot of load placed on his shoulders. And he fulfilled it, as a 17-year-old, to walk and go into this tournament and be such a standout young player. I think, was really impressive, and his market as a result, and I think Toby can probably attest to that as well, has risen significantly since. And there's now a world where I think Premier League teams will come in and quite happily pay whatever fee Tijuana is going to ask for him. And I think as a result, I think the 50 million euro market value upgrade is more than justified.
Yeah, I agree on that. He shown his qualities on the big stage right now. Before he was more or less known in America, but now also in Europe and everywhere fans who followed the tournament seen his qualities. And there are also rumors, for example, for Bayern and Dortmund, and I guess they will also follow some other European giants. So he did a very well, or he played a well. He played a well. He played a good World Cup, and yeah, I think the 15 million plus is a good start for even higher market value in the future.
Yeah, Toby, the next player on the list is maybe, I think, maybe the least known player on the list, and maybe it's just my own prejudices or preferences in football, but Martin Baturina, and my apologies, Croatia and FC Como attacking midfielder. He's also seen his market value increase by 15 million euros. I'm sure we've already spoken about him on the podcast before because Manu's had Marius on a few times to talk about Como and the fantastic job they're doing there. But what is it about Baturina that led to his market value getting a significant upgrade over the course of the World Cup?
Yeah, he also showed himself on the stage, had a great tournament, also a great goal against England, for example, and also with the Como style you said, he also showed that on the World Cup. Yeah, it's a player who's also very interesting on the market. We already seen that, and I also talked about him with our Italian team, and they also said, okay, he's a candidate also for a move, but also a candidate to play a very good season at Como, also with the Champions League. So he's also very exciting, and I'm interested to see how the next season he will develop.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just above him is Anthony Gordon, the new Barcelona winger, who was obviously a very important player for England throughout the competition. A player who I think received criticism and praise in equal measure depending on the game. I think he grew into the competition and as a result has, I think leaves the World Cup with a better reputation as an England player than he's maybe began with. I think some people were questioning his involvement in the starting 11 under Thomas Tuchel, but um, Toby, we're not just probably the first example maybe on this list of a player who's not just seen his market value increase because of what he did at the World Cup, but also because of what's happened to his career outside of it as well.
Yeah, he combines the two main aspects of this update, like the performances on the pitch, but also, in this case, also the fee that Barcelona paid for him. I think a lot of people outside England were surprised that he cost like 80 million euros for Barcelona. But I think I like him as a player. I think he can show also more in Barcelona than he showed in the Premier League last season. So he's he's a player who can also or have the opportunities to score more. But I also like him with his one-on-one dribbling and everything like that. So I think he could explode next season. So I think he suits Barcelona really good. So let's see what happens next season.
Yeah, a really interesting attacking lineup Barcelona building with Karim Adeyemi also joining them from Borussia Dortmund. Two players I don't think anyone would have predicted as Barcelona's main attacking players, but we'll definitely move on to that in a future podcast. The next player on this list is Ismail Saibari,
Mm.
apologies. Another player who's made a big transfer this summer. He's moved to Bayern Munich. Manu, did you get a chance to watch Saibari in
Yeah.
person? I'm trying to remember if you made it to one of
hmm
the Morocco games.
Yeah, I did see Morocco against Canada. Unfortunately, only him for 20 minutes, but I think my takeaway from that match was that you could really tell what happens when you take a player out like him, right? How important he was for Morocco. Canada really had a much easier time containing them after he was gone, and ultimately Morocco won that game 3-0. But it was two very late goals in the moment when Canada was really trying to press to get back into the match. So the scoreline kind of flattered Morocco in that match. And I think I also would have loved to see what Morocco could have done with Saibari in the lineup against France. I think they would have been a much more potent attacking side with him there. I like him a lot. I think he's so direct, can play so many different positions. Number 10 on the wings, even as a number 9, where he played for Morocco for most of the tournament. I think Bayern Munich did really well to secure him when they secured him, because I think following the tournament, if they hadn't done this before the tournament, I think a lot of other clubs would have swooped in and tried to get him. And yeah, I think, fantastic signing. And Toby, he's that 50 million euro upgrade. I think is just a stepping stone. I think we're going to see him play for Bayern, and very quickly he's going to keep rising.
Yeah, I'm also very excited for him to see him in the Bundesliga, also in this Bayern lineup where he will play. I think he has a lot of opportunities. Also with Company, who really rotates in the starting lineup. He did last season. So yeah, he's a player. He can also easily score 15 goals, I think, in the Bundesliga. I think we can expect that also from him. And he was very good in this tournament. And I also agree with Manuel that it was the right moment for Bayern to sign him more or less right before the World Cup. The announcement came later, but he was like fixed before the first game. So I think it was very good business for Bayern. And I'm really excited to see him in the Bundesliga next season.
Yeah, I think if you consider some of the fees that are being paid for midfielders and attacking midfielders in particular, some of them on this list, I think Saibari might go down as a bit of a steal for Bayern Munich. Another player who's been a big move, Jan Paul van Hecke. This one seems like a pretty straightforward one to me, Toby. He's moved to Tottenham for 60 million euros. This upgrade's obviously putting his market value more in line with that. I wasn't terribly impressed with the Dutch at this tournament. No one really stood out to me, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you think this is, we're also praising Van Hecke for his performances at this World Cup as well.
I think he was good, but not that outstanding. But that's also a main problem for Netherlands in general. I guess it was okay, but not very bad, but also not, not good. He's mainly updated because of his move to Tottenham, 16 million, as you said, and he's a Premier League proven center back in a good age group. So I think it's also a good transfer for Spurs. And yeah, I think he can be a good part of the defense there. They need a better defense, so that's a good signing, I guess. And then we will have to see what happens at Spurs next season.
Yeah, absolutely. The next player undoubtedly did thrive at this World Cup, and that is Johan Manzambi, who's seen his market value increase by 50 million euros. And Manu, this is a player we definitely could talk about his performances at the tournament. Obviously, injury kind of got in the way throughout it, but aside from a few of the other names on this list, I would say Manzambi was probably one of the breakout stars of this tournament for that Swiss side.
Yeah, brilliant player. I obviously seen him a few times in the Bundesliga, but he reached another level at the World Cup. Came on late against Bosnia, completely turned that game around. We had him in Vancouver against Canada a couple times, and 3 times actually. And what can you say? I mean, I think insiders knew that he was good. It was a good player. At the World Cup, he underlined that. Unfortunately for Newcastle, other teams did find out that he was good because I think they were actually in really early on him, and then he had these amazing performances, and then Aston Villa remembered that they played against him in the Europa League final as well, and swooped in and signed him. And yeah, I mean, I think Manzambi is going to be one of the biggest stars in the world. He's the full package, and I just an amazing player. And once he's healthy, I think Aston Villa fans will have a ton of fun with him.
Yeah, really, really interesting player. I'm sure Premier League fans are going to enjoy watching him this season. The next player on the list is an interesting one to me, Toby. Gonzalo Ramos. His market value has increased by 20 million euros to 50 million euros, returning to what it was a few seasons ago. Now, I think I'm safe in saying this is mostly to do with his move to AC Milan for 74 million euros, which I must admit raised at least one eyebrow on my face when I saw that fee. We've obviously not improved his market value to match that because, it's quite an astronomical fee in my opinion, but an interesting move, and obviously we have to acknowledge it with his market value.
Yeah, it's mainly because of this move to AC Milan. I think everyone was surprised about that. But I think you always have to consider that maybe also the market value of him was too low. maybe it was also a mistake right before that. So I think when we are now in the middle with the 50 million, it's okay. And I think also you have to think about when you see his season or his standing, I think he has maybe the worst part in football you can have right now. He
Mhm.
had Dembele and the Ballon d'Or winner in front of him at PSG, and in the national team he has Ronaldo, who never leave his place. So he had maybe the two of the biggest rivals right in front of him. So it wasn't easy for him. But I think he has potential to be a good striker with international class. But I think the 74 millions are way overpaid for him right now. Maybe he will show us a different in Milan. But it's kind of acknowledging that the fee is very high instead of the market value he had before.
Yeah, it feels almost like he's now entering this kind of second chapter in his career where he kind of gets back to basics and proves the player that he obviously was before he moved to PSG, um, both for his new club but also for his country. Assuming Ronaldo retires, I'm not sure if that's been made officially yet, but you never really know with Ronaldo. Moving on to the next player, we're now at that tier of players who've increased their market value by 20 million euros. Bradley Barcola, the PSG and French winger, has seen his market value increase by 90 million euros. I'll go back to you with this one, Toby, just because looking at, he's an interesting player because he obviously had a very good World Cup for France, but also because the speculation around him this summer certainly suggests that if he does leave PSG, which is looking likely, he's been linked to Liverpool, Arsenal, I think even Bayern Munich at one point. It would seem that at least 90 million euros would have to go the opposite way for a club to sign Barcola this summer.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's one of the most special players on the market, obviously, this summer. And you also said like Liverpool and Arsenal want him. And I think it's also time for him to move on, to be honest. He's too good to be too often on the bench for PSG, and also showed that in the World Cups, like spectacular player for me. And I personally really liked him. I want to see him more. And I would also like to see him in the Premier League. So, yeah. But we also stayed below 100 million because I think there's also one step for him to prove himself to be one or over 100 million, but he's quite near right now.
Yeah. The next player on the list is Pau Kubasi, who obviously won the award for Young Player of the Tournament, became a world champion with Spain. Seen his market value increase to 100 million euros. If I'm not mistaken, he's now the most valuable defender in the world on TransferMarkt. He hits 100 million euros. And Manu, we could argue to the cows come home about who was the most
Mhm.
important player for Spain in this tournament, but there's no doubt that Kubarsi was at the heart of a very impressive defensive performance from Spain across the tournament.
Oh, I don't think it's an argument who's the most important player for Spain. That's Rodri. It's not even close. Without Rodi, there is no upgrade for Pau Kupasi. I know without a doubt, a brilliant talent, 19 years old, played the World Cup with a calmness and was part of a defensive system that only conceded one goal in 8 games. Just let that sink in for a moment. That is unbelievable. And this is a Spain side that really struggled with their attacking football. Even in the World Cup final, the only reason that game lasted 120 minutes is because Spain's attack was pretty much toothless through the duration of the tournament. But it worked because they have Rodri, they have young guys like Pau Kupasi, and the system just ticks along, right? And I think that is the one and only problem I have with the Spain players individually is that, and Kupasi is a great example for that, is how do they work when they're not part of, like, let's say, a Barca system or the Spain system that is so completely in tune with one another. What happens if you take that individual player out? Is it still going to be the same? Because with Kupasi, you see certain things that you question, but then also you realize he's 19, and how many 19-year-old center backs play this sort of clean and really professional football in a World Cup final against an Argentina side that is just out there to murder you. And I thought that was very impressive.
Yeah, I guess you could argue that if you take these Spanish players out of the Spanish system. They go to Manchester City and win the Ballon d'Or, which is what Rodri
Yeah.
did. So I think they've certainly got
Yeah.
the pedigree for sure. But yeah, Cabarce, it feels like the world, his oyster at this moment in time, and he looks like a player who's going to just continue growing for years and years to come. An interesting player who's on a similar level to him, Toby, in terms of market value increases, is Morgan Rogers, who saw his market value increase to 110 million euros. By the time people watch or listen to this show, he's almost certainly going to be a Chelsea player. And if the fees are to be believed, he will be a record signing for Chelsea. Also, the most expensive midfielder in Premier League history, which again, is a topic we could debate for hours on end in terms of whether he's actually worth those fees. But at the end of the day, the market speaks for itself. And as a result, his market value did have to increase to take that into account. But obviously, we're not going to match his market value to whatever Chelsea paid for him, are we?
Yeah, I totally agree. The fee is kind of with English tax, like the German people say about that. So that's the price you have to pay for a very good player outside of the top six teams. If you want them, also like Elliot Anderson on top. They're both in that direction, but Anderson was better in this tournament. Rogers had his moments, but it's mostly of because of the fee that he rise like 20 million.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be up to him to obviously keep that market value above 100 million euros. We've seen plenty of players go above it and then drop back down, even some at Chelsea. So yeah, it'll be up to Rodgers to make sure he can certainly improve on that. Toby, I'll stick with you again with the next player, Julian Alvarez, who's seen his market value increase to 120 million euros.
Yeah,
It
I
didn't
had a
feel to me. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. It didn't feel to me like this was a kind of classic World Cup for Alvarez. It felt like he was more of a kind of hard-working player alongside Messi rather than the kind of technically gifted centre forward that we're used to watching for Atletico Madrid and beforehand Manchester City. But he still was an integral player for Argentina getting to the final. And much like Barcola and other players on this list, seems like he'll have a lot of transfer speculation around his future over the course of the next month as well.
Yeah, he's like one of the most interesting players on the market, as we already seen with the Real Madrid offer, the official one with 150, but also Barcelona who's fighting for him. So we don't go to the 150 I mentioned, because we think it's also some kind of politics in this case. But I think there is no doubt that Alvarez is really thought of from other people or other clubs. So yeah, he's one of the main guys when you go to big transfers for the window. So he will raise to 120, and then we will see where he plays next season.
Yeah. Interestingly, probably a good example for someone like Gonzalo Ramos, because obviously Alvarez had to leave Manchester City because he couldn't get game time being behind Erling Haaland. He's now left, and look what he's done with his career. So obviously a good example there. Manu, the next player, Michael Olise, a player you've watched plenty of for Bayern Munich, also saw a lot of at the World Cup. He's seen his market value increase by 20 million euros to 170 million euros. And I think that's quite significant because it now means he's the most valuable player under the three most valuable players in the world. So he's the fourth most valuable player in the world now with 170 million euros. But it feels like if you look at our market values, we're almost saying he's the best player outside of the top three. And I think that's probably quite a fair place to put Michael Olise at this point in his career.
Yeah. Broke the record for the most assists in a single World Cup, right? With 7. Although that includes that crazy third place game against England, I think, where no one was really interested in defending. It's a Bundesliga record. Correct me if I'm wrong. 170 million euros. It's a Bundesliga record. I mean, he's an incredible player, and I think Real Madrid would be more than willing and happy to pay 200 million euros to sign him if Bayern Munich would allow it, which they won't. I think these rumors are going to be there until either Olise signs a new contract or leaves on a free deal to join Real Madrid. And with that in mind, I think there is no there is no doubt that he's now one of the elite players on the planet. He's shown it at this tournament, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he maybe can break into that very, very top echelon. Probably needs to win a World Cup or Champions League with Bayern to do so. But what an amazing player, and so very complete. I think it's going to be also fascinating to see he has apparently told his representatives that he would like to play as a number 10 for Bayern Munich rather than on a wing. So it's going to be interesting to see whether he's going to get to do that and what that will mean for his market value going forward if he's successful in doing it.
Yeah, certainly is. And he's got so much ahead of him, as you say, whether that's at Bayern Munich or perhaps at another club via a record transfer fee. We'll certainly see. I don't think that's going to happen this summer, but you never know what could happen down the line. Next on the list, Toby, is one of, as I said, the big three, Kylian Mbappé, who has seen his market value increase by 20 million euros. And he has returned to 200 million euro market value. Now, if my memory serves me right, we discussed exactly this potential happening ahead of the World Cup and whether Mbappe could get back to that kind of, that level if he was to perform for France. And even though France didn't go on to reach the final and didn't go on to another World Cup success, I think everyone could probably happily agree that Mbappe was once again outstanding for France at a World Cup.
Yeah, I think we saw a bit of prime Mbappé again after a difficult season for Real Madrid, but we also seen also with Bellingham later in the list and also Vini and some other Real Madrid players that they are elite players, but it doesn't look like that at the end of the season for Real. So they are all back at their best or back in top form. So Mbappé is going back, but as you said, we always said when he's having a good World Cup, then he can go up again. And now we've seen that it's the reality.
Can I just say something about Mbappe? I wonder if we sometimes do him justice. When Ronaldo and Messi are no more, I think there is no doubt in my mind that he is the biggest star in the world and the best player in the world. A bad season for Mbappe is an amazing season for everyone else. And 22 goals now in 20 World Cup games, won the final. When he was a teenager, he led France to a World Cup. In 2018, I was there. He scored 4 goals and 2 assists in that tournament for France side that didn't score a lot of goals. And he's going to set a record for most goals at the World Cup that will never be broken because no one is going to get there. And I sometimes wonder if we do him justice. I think he is the best player in the world, and I don't think it's even close.
Well, do you know what? What I'll do is I'll throw in the other two names just above him on the list, which are Lamine Yamal and Haaland, who also saw their market values increase by 20 million euros, so similar to Mbappe. But Haaland and Yamal both now go to 220 million euros. Is that the highest market value we've ever given to players, Toby? Yeah.
Yes,
and so we're saying, sorry?
That's the new record.
Yeah. So we're basically saying, right now Haaland and Yamal are slightly above Mbappe. Now, I wrote a piece for TransferMarkt earlier in the week talking about Mbappe, and while I do agree with what Manu was saying in terms of, on his day, he's still, could certainly argue the best player in the world. It does feel like success is eluding him a little bit more so than Yamal and Haaland in the sense, he's now gone 2 seasons at Real Madrid without a trophy. Didn't win the World Cup with France there. And as I said in the article, he's going to go back to Madrid where it's Jose Mourinho's in charge, which is a huge risk for Real Madrid. That might end up blowing up in smoke. So he might have another season where he doesn't win success with Real Madrid. So Mbappe's in an almost interesting situation where he is, as Manu says, undoubtedly one of the best players in the world, or perhaps the best player in the world for most football fans, but isn't enjoying the same success as Haaland and Yamal at this moment in time.
I think it's you can find for all 3 players, Haaland, Yamal, Mbappe, reasons why you would love them to be the best player in the world. I also agree with Manuel. I think there are good points in it. You can see it like that. But I think they all have some different overall packages. So they're all kind of different. And for Lamine Yamal, I think also, as Manu said, doing Mbappé injustice. I think some people also in this World Cup do Yamal injustice because we are so used to his performances in this age and everything like that we also see it's too common to be also a part of the World Cup champion. As we see that's the highest level you can get, and he's, even when he's not having the best performances according to scorer or to goal contributions, I think still he's also really a main guy in this team also. And also when you compare him with the stats with Messi had at this time, I don't say he's better or will be better, but he's so ahead of every other 19-year-old, I guess, in history, as I don't want to mention Pelé as I don't saw him. But I think we are so used to him breaking standards that we also do him injustice. So, and also with Lamine Yamal, I can also say it's the update itself is not basically on performances because, we've seen the goal contributions were not there. But when we also talk about having the fees rising this summer, and when we see 150 million for Alvarez and other players like that, then I also said and decided in this update is that this rise also affect Lamine Yamal in this case. And now he's on top together with Erling Haaland, who's also 2 years younger than Mbappé. So as I said, everyone has good reasons to be on top. So we decided for these two on the very top and then Mbappé just behind it. But yeah, the main point was, I think, also Lamine Yamal, you can't reduce him on okay performances this time because he's so ahead of nearly everyone, in my opinion.
You know, this is beautiful because it takes us behind the scenes, because this was hotly debated, and you know, the decision is what it is. But with Yamal, I've seen him now play for Spain a few times live. You know, the Euros, Nations League, World Cup, and I've seen Messi play live and Mbappé play live and Haaland play live for the club teams and the national teams. And the one thing that I'm still missing with Yamal is when he has the ball, he will just get there, break through, and be dangerous and feared. For Mbappe, when he has the ball, you right away think, oh my God, we're in trouble. But Yamal, I don't have that feeling. And at this World Cup in particular, he didn't really have that same sort of oomph and power that an Mbappe had when he carried France to the World Cup in 2018, also as a teenager. And that is maybe something that I'm personally still missing. And the other thing I'm missing, there were all these beautiful moments with his brother and all that. But I can't, in America, he didn't kind of break through the same way as an Mbappe did. You know, there won't be lots of Americans now walking around with Lamine Yamal jerseys. That's just not happening because they don't see this as a Lamine Yamal team because of the way Spain play. And I think that is maybe where I think someone would pay 220 million euros for him. Don't get me wrong. You know, I can see any team in the world say if that's a possibility, they will probably do it. But I'm not quite as swooped away maybe as I was with Mbappe when he broke through, if that makes sense. But I mean, at the same time, you know, this is not a consensus decision, and it never really is. And I can see the other side of the opinion as well.
I think you also have to bear in mind that Yamal was probably still recovering from an injury for much of this tournament and still was very important for Spain. So I think you both make great points. And as you said, it gives a great insight into, you know, the discussions that go on behind closed doors at TransferMarkt without obviously letting everyone see everything, but I think that's definitely worth noting. And only thing I have to add is poor Erling Haaland, completely ignored. He was the star of this competition. I think probably the most popular player at it, and I think we can all agree that his market value is acceptable because he continues to score goals and do funny videos on the internet. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. But of course, he's a fantastic player. And remains the joint most valuable player in the world alongside Lamine Yamal. I'm going to race through the rest of these guys because we are slowly running out of time. And three more players that I do want to touch on. Ayo Boadi and Jude Bellingham, both with a €30 million increase. Bellingham moves into 5th place as the most valuable player in the world, just behind Michael Olise. I think that really goes without saying. His performances for England were outstanding at this tournament. If England were to go on and win the tournament or get to the final, I think Bellingham would have been certainly up there with Rodri or Messi for player of the tournament. But Boadi, Toby, is undoubtedly probably one of those standout performers. I remember Ronan Karoff, the head of our French team, going on and on about Boadi 18 months ago when he was trying to figure out whether to play for Morocco or France and tried to explain to the rest of the company why this was such a big deal. And to give Rono his credit, the rest of the world now knows exactly who this guy is, and he's now probably one of the most promising midfielders in the world.
Yeah, I also remember that after a lot of updates, he was always mentioned also from the German fans, like, who's this guy from Lille who's like 50, 60 million euros. And also friends of me said that then only at halftime in the first game against Brazil, everyone said, "Wow, what a baller is this guy?" And yeah, it's like I said with Mora, he showed it now on the biggest stage you have. And there are also rumors with Man City, for example. I think it's also a team that would suit him.
Mhm.
Yeah, has the world on his feet. He has so much potential. It's really, really exciting player.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider the way that France were knocked out by Spain with what I thought, in my opinion, was some poor performances in midfield, they certainly could have used Boadi in there. But Manu, just to wrap up, Elliot Anderson, maybe a bit of an anticlimax. He did have a very good performance for England at the World Cup. I actually thought in that Argentina game he was outstanding until he came off. He did a really good job of kind of dictating pace and control in that game. But of course, his market value increased by 35 million euros to 110 million euros is mostly down to his transfer fee to Manchester City.
Yeah, but also in fairness, I mean, this tournament was good, right? And he too demonstrates why midfield is so important to win, right? And I think it's the same with Declan Rice. When he wasn't 100% anymore for England, it really showed. He got hit by Montezuma's revenge, right? After the stint in Mexico. And it just shows. And I think, that the market is going that way. Central midfielders are really important. And Elliot Anderson, there's a reason why Man City are willing to spend this much money for him. And I think
absolutely.
we're
But
going
as we
to.
said with Rogers a moment ago, he's now going to have to live up to that fee
Yep.
and that market value. So it'll be certainly interesting to see if we're back here in 6 months' time talking about Anderson's market value dropping below 110 million euros or going above it. Will he be the next Calvin Phillips or will he be the next Rodri? This is why we love football. And this is why we keep an eye on the market values at TransferMarkt. Toby, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. Manu, it's always been a pleasure. We're going to have to wrap up there for another week. But if you guys enjoyed this and you want to find out more, you can, of course, head to TransferMarkt and read the fantastic article that Manu has put together on the market value update. And if you want to have your say, you can also jump into the market value forums, which will all be reset, if I'm not mistaken, Toby, after this market value update. And you can also have your say on which players you think. So, you might think that Lamine Yamal shouldn't be worth that much. You might agree with Manu, or you might think that, Gonzalo Ramos should be worth 75 million euros and we don't know what we're talking about. You can let us know in the forums. And always, thank you for listening and watching this podcast. And we'll speak to you guys next week.